Imagine a prison without walls, without guards, without locks or chains. A prison so seductive that no one wants to leave it. People smile inside their cells, entertained, satisfied, lulled into comfort so deep that the thought of escape never even crosses their minds. This is not a nightmare of whips and shackles. It is a golden trap that Aldous Huxley saw so clearly in his prophetic vision. A society where people are subdued not by force, but by their own desire for pleasure. Where tyranny doesn't roar. It whispers through laughter, through indulgence, through endless distraction. Nearly a century ago, Huxley painted this chilling portrait in Brave New World. He foresaw that the rulers of the future wouldn't need to rely on pain or fear. Why break bones when you can seduce minds? Why use chains when screens and stimulants do the job better? He understood that pleasure, soft, inviting, sweet, could be far more effective than violence. Pleasure doesn't ignite revolutions. It silences them. When people are busy enjoying themselves, they don't question. They don't resist. They don't even think deeply about life. They surrender willingly to their comforts. Think about it. Pain has always united people in defiance. Oppression sparks flames of rebellion. When human beings suffer collectively, they rise together, fueled by outrage and the demand for justice. But pleasure works in the opposite direction. It isolates. It sends each person into their own bubble of entertainment, their own private cell, where satisfaction drowns out the instinct to resist. Each person locks themselves in with the golden key of comfort, decorating their cell with the illusions they love most. The genius, no, the diabolical genius of this system is that it doesn't feel like control at all. It feels like freedom. After all, who would object to happiness? Who would complain about abundance, amusement, or convenience? Yet, beneath the glossy surface lies a more terrifying reality. This happiness is a kind of living death. When life is reduced to shallow pleasures, the human spirit begins to wither. Growth stops. Curiosity fades. Questions die unasked. People become comfortable corpses, smiling and laughing as their true vitality drains away. And from this sinister design emerges the greatest factory humanity has ever built. Not a factory of steel and smoke, not one of machines or cars or clothes, but a factory of synthetic happiness. Modern society, Huxley warned, was evolving into a machine designed to mass-produce artificial emotions, training us all to consume instead of to live. This machine is subtle, so subtle that most never notice they're caught inside it. Advertising is one of its most powerful tools. You've seen it before, smiling faces in commercials, people laughing with friends over product, glowing with joy. You watch and somewhere inside, a spark ignites. Maybe if I had that, I'd feel the same. And so, a desire is born where none existed before. You buy, you consume, you satisfy, and for a moment, just a fleeting moment, you feel good. But soon enough the glow fades, leaving behind a craving for the next thing, and the next, and the next. A never-ending cycle of desire. Purchase, disappointment, repeat. Now, let's be clear. Pleasure itself is not the enemy. Watching a movie on a rainy evening, treating yourself to something nice, these aren't inherently harmful. The problem begins when pleasure becomes constant, when it becomes an escape, when it replaces the ability to sit quietly with your own thoughts. That is when the trap snaps shut. Imagine a muscle never used. It grows weak, fragile, unable to handle strain. In the same way, when a person avoids real difficulties by drowning in distractions, their emotional depth weakens. Compassion, courage, genuine love, these higher capacities require challenge. Without them, the human heart grows shallow. And shallow emotions are predictable. People stuck in cycles of instant pleasure react in the same ways over and over again. Sad? Seek a distraction. Bored? Chase stimulation. Lonely? Dive into a screen. The system knows this. It thrives on predictability. Because if you always reach for the same pleasures, you are controllable. Your strings are visible, and someone else is pulling them. Huxley symbolized this trap with a single word, soma, in Brave New World. Soma was the miracle drug, a pill for every pain. Sadness, anxiety, fear, pop a soma, and the problem vanished. at least for a while. It was a magic solution, painless and addictive. And though we don't swallow a pill called soma today, the modern world is overflowing with substitutes. We consume our soma every single day, often without realizing it. Think about social media. The moment loneliness strikes or insecurity creeps in, what do? We grab the phone. We scroll. We swim in likes, comments, videos. The emptiness fades for a moment, but the relief is temporary. And when it ends, the pain often returns stronger, pulling us back into the cycle. Pornography functions as another kind of soma. It delivers instant gratification, without the challenges of intimacy, without the growth of a real relationship. But afterward, it leaves behind a void, a deeper hunger. Shopping is another soma. That thrill when you buy something new, that fleeting sense of fulfillment. Gone within days, sometimes hours, replaced by the itch to buy again. Even medicine, in some cases, can turn into soma. Of course, many people genuinely need medical help, and there's no shame in that. But when pills are used simply to numb sadness, anxiety, or discomfort without addressing their roots, they become another escape hatch, another way to avoid growth. All these modern somas share a disturbing similarity. They offer temporary relief without requiring effort. They don't cure. They don't heal. They cover. Like a bandage on a deep wound, they hide the pain while the infection spreads underneath. And with every cycle of relief, desire, and emptiness, freedom slips further away. Huxley saw the danger. He saw that when pleasure becomes constant, it forges invisible chains. Chains so comfortable, so pleasurable, that people never resist them. They believe they are free because they can choose. Choose to watch, to buy, to indulge. But in reality, it's not them choosing. It's their impulses choosing for them. A French thinker long before Huxley, Etienne de la Boétie, wrote of voluntary servitude, the strange phenomenon of people willingly submitting to slavery. Because freedom is hard. Freedom requires responsibility, courage, discomfort. Slavery, dressed in the clothing of pleasure, offers security, comfort, ease. Picture it this way. It's like an addiction to chocolate. You know too much is harmful, but the taste is irresistible. Now magnify that every form of pleasure, endless, constant, socially encouraged. A life where the sweetest poison is not only accepted, but celebrated. That is the invisible cage. That is a trap. But perhaps the most dangerous aspect of all is that this prison doesn't look like captivity. It looks like choice. People can eat, drink, play, shop, indulge as much as they want. The trap isn't in what they can do. It's in what they can't. They cannot stop. They cannot be still. They cannot face silence, boredom, discomfort. And when pleasure becomes mandatory, when it's the only option, it ceases to be pleasure at all. It becomes prison. And so arises a paradox that Huxley understood with terrifying clarity. Excess comfort is just as deadly as its absence. When life is too easy, when satisfaction is always within reach, people stop striving. They stop fighting for freedom. Like a muscle that wastes away from disuse, the will to live fully, bravely, and freely begins to atrophy. Look around. Do you see it? The apathy toward politics, the indifference toward society, the distraction that keeps people from questioning, it is all part of the same disease. Political apathy is one of the clearest symptoms of this golden prison. When people are fed constantly with amusements, entertainment, and comforts, they stop caring about what truly shapes their lives. Leaders and governments can make decisions that affect millions, yet the masses are too distracted to notice. They sit at home, scrolling, watching, consuming, venting their frustrations online, but never taking action in the real world. Complaints replace resistance. Comments replace protest. And so, power quietly grows unchecked. This anesthetization doesn't stop at politics. It invades the deepest corners of the human spirit. People used to ask the great questions of life. Why am I here? What is my purpose? How should I live? What happens when I die? These questions, though uncomfortable, were the engines of philosophy, spirituality, and self-discovery. But in a world drowning in distraction, who has time for silence? Who dares to sit alone with such thoughts when entertainment is just one tap away? It is easier to drown in noise than to face the abyss of meaning. This avoidance of the big questions leads to spiritual alienation. Life becomes shallow, reduced to routines of work, consumption, and play. The mysteries of existence, the sacred, the transcendent, the eternal, fade into the background. Instead, the body becomes a new temple, but a temple of hedonism, not of reverence. The body is no longer seen as a vessel for the soul, but as an object of endless indulgence and worship. Pleasure, looks, gratification, these take the place of depth, discipline, and growth. The danger here is subtle but immense. When the body becomes a final destination, the person gets trapped in an endless chase of desires. Desire promises freedom, but delivers slavery. Carl Jung once warned that unchecked desires are illusions of freedom. You think you're in control because you're doing what you want, but in reality, your wants are controlling you. It's like a dog running in circles after its own tail. Lots of motion, no progress. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer went even further, declaring that desire itself is suffering. Before you satisfy it, you suffer from lack. After you satisfy it, another desire emerges. And when you lose what you desired, you suffer again. It's an endless cycle of discontent, cleverly disguised as freedom. But there is something even darker happening. It's not just about pleasure. It's about noise. The murder of silence. In Huxley's time, noise came from radio, advertisements, the clamorous cities. Today it is everywhere. Digital noise, mental noise, emotional noise. People carry the chaos of the world in their pockets, ready to flood their minds the moment silence begins to creep in. And it's not only the outer noise that destroys us. The inner chatter, the constant swirl of thoughts, worries, and fantasies is even more suffocating. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in complete silence? No phone, no music, no screen, no conversation, just you and your thoughts? For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. Silence feels like a threat because in silence, the truth emerges. You cannot distract yourself. You cannot hide. Silence reflects back to you everything you are avoiding. That is why mystics throughout history, whether Christian monks, Buddhist meditators, Sufi dervishes, or Taoist sages, have always retreated into silence, because silence cleanses. Silence allows you to hear your real voice, the one buried beneath distractions. But in a world addicted to stimulation, silence feels unbearable. Imagine a lake. When stones are constantly thrown into it, the water ripples endlessly, hiding what lies beneath. Only when the water becomes still can you see clearly to the bottom. The human mind is the same. Only in silence, when no new stimuli disturb the surface, can you see into your depths. That is why Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. But how can we examine life if we never let it be quiet long enough to see it? And here lies one of the most disturbing trends of modernity, the transformation of adults into children. Huxley called infantilization. Adults, outwardly grown, but inwardly like little kids, incapable of tolerating frustration, constantly demanding instant gratification, deeply offended by small discomforts. This was not an accident. He warned, infantilization is a strategy of control. Children are easy to rule. Give them candy when they cry, and they learn to obey. Give adults pleasures when they complain, and they stop questioning authority. Look around. Adults rage when Wi-Fi lags. They despair if an online order is delayed. They fume when someone disagrees with them on social media. Every small frustration becomes catastrophe. Life becomes a series of tantrums, soothed by digital candy. Nietzsche saw this coming too. He spoke of the last man, a weak figure of the future, obsessed only with comfort and safety, avoiding all risk, all challenge. The last man seeks nothing higher than to be unbothered. And that is exactly what infantilized adults have become. They prefer a small, secure life over a great and dangerous one. And what happens to a society filled with such people? It stagnates. Infantilized citizens don't demand justice. They don't confront corruption. They don't strive for greatness. They are too busy chasing toys, new gadgets, new shows, new distractions. While they suck on their lollipops of consumption, the world burns around them. And the powerful laugh. Because nothing is easier to control than a crowd of grown children distracted by sweets. But here is where resistance becomes possible. If pleasure can enslave, then authentic spirituality, discipline, and inner work can free. True spirituality is not the glittering consumer version filled with promises of quick bliss, instant manifestation, and endless positivity. That is just another candy, another soma dressed in sacred clothing. Real spirituality is difficult. It demands courage, honesty, and the willingness to suffer consciously. It is not about escaping pain, but about learning from it. Pain, in fact, is not the enemy. Pain teaches compassion. When you have suffered, you understand the suffering of others. Emptiness is not a curse. It teaches humility, reminding you that you are not the center of the universe. Doubt is not failure. It is the seed of wisdom, pushing you to seek deeper truths. These experiences, the ones society tells you to escape, are the very teachers that shape strength of character. Huxley saw this clearly. Artificial happiness kills growth, but real struggle births freedom. But here's the paradox. Not all pleasure is a trap. There's a vital difference between pleasure that enslaves and pleasure that liberates. Enslaving pleasure comes from escapism. It numbs, distracts, disconnects. Liberating pleasure, on the other hand, comes from presence. It awakens, connects, deepens. Watching television for hours dulls the mind. Watching the sunset sharpens the soul. One makes you forget reality. The other helps you perceive it more vividly. The same goes for human bonds. Shallow connections, based on likes, appearances, or convenience, leave emptiness behind. But genuine bonds, where two people open up, share vulnerability, create together, laugh deeply, love honestly, that kind of connection nourishes rather than depletes. It liberates rather than imprisons. Artistic creation is another example. Writing, painting, dancing, singing, when these flow from the heart, they don't enslave. They free. Because the pleasure of creation is not about escape, but about expression. It turns suffering into beauty, chaos into meaning. That is why true art has always been dangerous to oppressive systems. It awakens rather than sedates. And this brings us to the decisive choice every individual must make. In a world drowning in artificial pleasures, how can one live freely without rejecting pleasure altogether? After all, life without joy would be unbearable. The key is not denial but awareness. Awareness is the great weapon against manipulation. It is the pause between impulse and action, the ability to see the chain before it wraps around you. Practices exist to cultivate this awareness. Before picking up your phone or buying something impulsively, pause. 10 seconds. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I escaping something, or am I engaging with life? This tiny gap creates freedom. Another practice is the pleasure fast. Once a week, deliberately abstain from one habitual indulgence. Social media, music, sweets, television. Not forever, just for a day. It reveals how dependent you become and strengthens your capacity for choice. There are also conscious pleasures to cultivate. A walk in nature, a real conversation with a friend, a book that challenges you instead of numbs you, learning something difficult but rewarding. These are pleasures that expand instead of shrink, connect instead of isolate. And when discomfort arises, sadness, boredom, fear, don't run. Sit with it, observe it, ask what it's teaching. Often the doorway to freedom is hidden right behind the feelings we most want to avoid. True freedom, Huxley suggested, requires us to step beyond comfort. It's like leaving a warm swimming pool to dive into the open sea. At first it shocks, stings, terrifies. But then, in the vastness of the water, you feel truly alive. That is the kind of freedom we're seeking. Huxley's great warning wasn't only about the dangers of pleasure. It was about the terrible choice every human being must face. Do we continue living inside the soft, golden blanket of illusion? Or do we wake up to the often harsh but liberating truth? Truth is rarely comfortable. It strips away the masks we wear, the excuses we tell ourselves, the distractions we hide behind. Illusion, on the other hand, is cozy. It tells us everything is fine, that nothing needs to change, that we can go on forever in our cycle of consumption and distraction. That is why so many people cling to illusion. It feels safe. But truth, though painful at first, is the only path that leads to growth. It's like stepping outside on a freezing morning. The air stings your skin, the cold shocks your body, and every part of you wants to run back inside. Yet if you stay, if you keep moving, that discomfort awakens you. It sharpens your senses, strengthens your body, and leads you somewhere new. Illusion may be warm, but it leaves you stagnant. Truth may be cold, but it moves you forward. Every day, consciously or unconsciously, we face this dilemma. It's easier to pretend the world has no problems than to acknowledge the realities of poverty, injustice, or environmental collapse. It's easier to believe everything will work out than to take responsibility for change. In our personal lives, it's easy to act as if everything is fine in our marriages, careers, or mental health than to admit the cracks that need repair. Denial is pleasurable because it avoids pain. But avoided pain doesn't disappear. It festers, it accumulates, and when it finally bursts, the damage is far worse. Choosing truth over illusion is not only a personal matter, it's an ethical act. When you choose illusion, you don't just deceive yourself. You reinforce a world built on lies, where appearance matters more than essence, where comfort is valued over honesty. When you choose truth, no matter how uncomfortable, you become a small but real force of resistance against a system of manipulation. And here lies the most dangerous shift of all, the way modern society has inverted the sacred. For centuries, the human body was considered a temple, a bridge to something greater. It was not worshipped as an idol, but honored as a vessel. Now, the body has become the altar itself, not as a path, but as the end. It is sculpted, decorated, indulged, displayed, not to transcend, but to gratify. This reversal turns the body from a tool of liberation into a cage, a prison of desires, each one promising fulfillment, but delivering deeper emptiness. Carl Jung spoke of this trap as the illusion of freedom. The person believes they are free because they can indulge in every desire, but in reality, they are chained to those desires. They cannot stop. They cannot say no. It is not freedom. It is slavery disguised as choice. Schopenhauer's cycle of endless dissatisfaction spins faster and faster. Craving, temporary satisfaction, boredom, craving again. The wheel never stops. And then there is the murder of silence. This may be the greatest crime of all. Silence is the birthplace of self-knowledge, the well from which wisdom flows. Yet silence is being erased. Noise, stimulation, distraction, these fill every gap, every pause, every empty moment. Even waiting in line, people cannot endure the stillness. Out comes the phone. Out comes the scroll. Anything to avoid the terrifying confrontation with themselves. But silence is not emptiness. It is depth. It is the still lake that reveals what lies beneath. Without silence, the soul starves. The mind never still, never rests. And when the mind never rests, it never sees clearly. This is why mystics across all traditions made silence a sacred practice. Only in silence do we encounter the truths that cannot be spoken. Only in silence do we begin to meet who we really are. Yet the modern world fears silence because silence cannot be sold. It cannot be packaged, monetized, or consumed. Silence threatens a machine because the silence awakens. This leads to Huxley's sharpest criticism, the infantilization of humanity. We spoke earlier of adults becoming oversized children. Let's look deeper. Children cannot delay gratification. They want candy now, not later. They cannot endure discomfort. They want to avoid it at all costs. Infantilized adults behave the same way. They cannot tolerate the smallest frustration without exploding. They cannot handle opposing views without outrage. They seek comfort constantly, and when it is denied, they collapse. This is not an accident. Infantilization is engineered, because a society of children is a society that can be controlled with candy. Give them entertainment, gadgets, quick pleasures, and they will obey. They will not question authority. They will not rise against injustice. Nietzsche's last man is alive today, content with little pleasures, avoiding big truths. Safe, small, weak. And while they play with their toys, power consolidates. But Huxley also left us with hope. If manipulation through pleasure is one path, resistance through awakening is another. And the heart of this resistance is awareness, not blind rejection of pleasure, not becoming an ascetic monk in the mountains, but learning to see clearly, to ask, does this pleasure free me or trap me? To pause before acting, to fast from pleasures and test your strength, to cultivate deeper joys, nature, friendship, creation, learning, to embrace discomfort as a teacher rather than an enemy. Awareness turns a cage of pleasure into an opportunity for freedom. It gives you back the power to choose. Without awareness, you're pulled by impulses. With awareness, you can act from clarity. And here's the final paradox. Artificial pleasure feels safe, but it kills. Real life, messy, difficult, painful, is dangerous, but it saves. Imagine the difference between lying forever in a warm bed and stepping out into the storm. The bed is easy, but you never go anywhere. The storm is hard, but it takes you places you never imagined. This is a choice Huxley forces us to face. Do we keep sleeping in the comfort of illusion, or do we dare to wake up to the fierce adventure of being truly human? And the answer begins not tomorrow, not someday, but now. With a single question you can ask yourself before your next indulgence, your next distraction, your next escape. Does this pleasure free me, or does it trap me? If you answer honestly and act on that answer, you take your first step toward freedom. And one real, difficult, imperfect life, lived in truth, is worth more than 1,000 easy lives lived in illusion.